Ila's hands were raw, not from any one job, but from all three. The dishwashing at the diner had ended at 2 a.m. The rideshare gig dragged until dawn, and now after a 4-hour nap on the couch, he was back on his feet at the auto parts store. The clock struck 2:48 p.m. when he realized Lila. He dropped the box of spark plugs mid-aisle and rushed out fumbling with his keys. His beat-up sedan coughed as it started just like always. At school, Lila sat cross-legged on the bench near the gate, humming to herself, doodling with her finger on the dusty sidewalk. She looked up and smiled before he even pulled in. "You're not that late," she chirped, climbing into the passenger seat. Eli exhaled. His shoulders relaxed for the first time that day. "Sorry, bug. Work ran long." Lila shrugged. "It's okay. I drew a giraffe that turned into a cloud." "Want to see?" And just like that, she made him forget how tired he was. But what Eli didn't know was that tomorrow during a walk home, she'd meet a stranger and ask a question no adult expects to hear from a child. Claire wasn't supposed to be near a school. Not because she wasn't allowed, no. It was nothing like that. She simply avoided them. Schools, playgrounds, toy stores, anywhere. The laughter of children echoed like an old song she couldn't bear to hear again. But today, traffic had forced her off the main road, and now her feet were planted firmly at the corner of Maple and Finch, right across from Hawthorne Elementary. The school bell rang. A wave of children spilled out in chaotic patterns, backpacks, bouncing voices, shrill and joyful. Claire's hands tightened on her coffee cup. She told herself to keep walking. Just one more block and she'd be back to the office. Back to the safety of spreadsheets and people who spoke only about mergers and deadlines. But then something tugged at her vision. A little girl no older than 8 or 9 stood alone near the gate. Her backpack was worn, one strap held together with blue duct tape. She was tracing shapes into the dust with her sneaker. Claire should have looked away. She didn't. The girl looked up. Their eyes met across the street just for a second. Claire felt a tiny jolt behind her ribs. It wasn't recognition, it was something more primal, like an ache, or a whisper from a life she'd buried. The crossing guard raised a hand to her. Claire blinked, startled, and stepped into the crosswalk. She passed right by the gate as the girl continued watching her. The little voice called out. "Hi." Claire turned almost against her will. "Hi," she replied cautiously. "You're pretty. Are you someone's mom?" The question, so innocent and casual, hit her like a truck. Claire smiled tightly. "No, not anymore." Before the girl could ask more, a beat-up sedan pulled up. The little girl beamed, running toward the car and jumping in. Claire stood still, watching them drive off. The man, probably the father, looked exhausted, but his eyes sparkled when his daughter handed him something. Claire turned away. Her steps felt heavier than before. She didn't realize it yet, but she would see the girl again. And this time the child would ask something even more impossible. Claire hadn't meant to walk that way again. But something about the little girl's eyes had lingered. There was a quiet strength behind them, a hopefulness too mature for a child so young. So 2 days later, Claire found herself strolling past Hawthorne Elementary just as the final bell rang. She told herself she was just passing through. But then she saw her again. Lila sitting on the curb, swinging her legs, a folded paper in her lap. This time, Claire didn't keep walking. Lila noticed her immediately. "You came back," she said almost accusingly. Claire smiled. "I was just passing by." "That's what grown-ups say when they mean something else," Lila replied, shrugging. Claire chuckled. "You're sharp." There was a pause. The street was busy with pickup cars, kids laughing, teachers ushering. Lila stood up, brushed the dust off her jeans, and stepped forward. She held out the paper. Claire hesitated but took it. It was a drawing, stick figures, crayons. A house, a girl, a woman, and a man. Underneath in big block letters, it read, "Even just for a day." Claire blinked. "What's this?" Lila's voice trembled. "It's me. That's my dad. And I was wondering." Claire crouched to meet her eyes. "Go on." Lila swallowed. Will you be my mommy for a day?" The world around them faded. Claire's breath caught in her throat. "I know it's weird." Lila rushed on. "But my real mom, she's gone. And Dad's been so tired lately. I thought maybe if I had a mom for just one day, he might smile again." Claire's heart cracked clean down the middle. "I saw you and you looked kind. And sometimes people need help pretending just for a little while." Claire couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but nothing came. A horn honked. Lila turned. "That's my dad." She waved, then looked back. "It's okay if you say no. I just thought maybe." Claire watched her go, the paper still in her hand. For a long time, she didn't move. Then she folded the drawing carefully, tucked it into her purse, and walked away, carrying with her a question that would not stop echoing in her heart. Claire couldn't remember the last time she'd walked home instead of calling a car. She didn't even realize how far she'd gone until she looked up and found herself blocks from her apartment, the city's evening buzz muffled behind the glass walls of silence that had surrounded her. In her purse, the folded drawing still sat its edges, softening from her touch. She hadn't stopped holding it since Lila handed it to her. "Will you be my mommy for a day?" The words had rooted deep inside her, blooming into something she wasn't ready to name. She pushed open her front door and was met with stillness. No toys on the rug, no spilled juice, just the quiet hum of an untouched home. Claire stepped into the living room and walked toward the cabinet tucked beneath the window. Her fingers hovered for a moment, then pulled it open. Inside was a small box. She lifted the lid carefully, as if afraid the memories might spill out too quickly. A tiny blue race car, a crumpled drawing of a house with "Mom plus me" written in green crayon. A sock, just one, from a pajama set he had loved. Her son's name had been Noah. He'd been 5. A car had run the red light. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since the sound of tiny footsteps vanished from her hallway. Since laughter was something she remembered, not experienced. She sank to the floor, the paper in one hand, the sock in the other. She hadn't spoken his name in months. Not aloud, but tonight it trembled from her lips. Noah. Tears came not in torrents, but in slow, aching drops that carved silent rivers down her cheeks. Claire didn't sleep much that night. Lila's voice haunted her. So did her eyes. And somewhere in the quiet space between pain and dawn, Claire admitted something she hadn't dared say before. She missed being a mother more than she feared remembering what she had lost. It was Saturday and the rain fell in soft sheets across the windows of Elise Mata's kitchen. The old kettle sputtered on the stove, steam hissing upward like a weary sigh. Eli leaned on the counter, watching Lila at the table. She was unusually quiet, a crayon gripped tightly in her hand as she pressed color into paper with focused determination. "Homework?" he asked, taking 2 mismatched mugs down from the shelf. She didn't look up. Not really. He walked over and peered over her shoulder. The drawing was simple but expressive, a big-eyed girl with pigtails holding hands with a woman wearing a long coat and a kind smile. Behind them was a bright, sun-lopsided hearts and a faint outline of a museum. Eli raised an eyebrow. "New character." Lila hesitated. "Just someone I saw once." He nodded slowly, sensing there was more. But parenting as a single dad had taught him that some answers arrived in their own time. He kissed the top of her head. "Looks beautiful." She waited until he turned around to pour the tea before she carefully tore a page from her notebook. Using her best handwriting, she scrawled a short note at the bottom of the drawing. "If you remember me even just for a day, XX 1973, Lila." She folded it neatly, slid it into her backpack, and zipped it shut. That afternoon, Eli brought Lila with him to the local grocery store, a weekly errand turned small ritual. She trailed beside him as he chatted with neighbors and helped an older woman reach the top shelf. Lila was distracted, eyes scanning faces, her fingers gripping the note. Near the flower display by the window, she stopped. Her heart thudded. She didn't see Claire, but something told her this was the right place. When Eli stepped away to grab pasta, Lila reached for the display board where flyers and notes were often tacked: missing pets, piano lessons, community dinners. With shaking hands, she pinned the folded paper on the corner of the board, hiding it just behind a help-wanted flyer. No one saw her, but she walked away with a strange lightness in her chest. Not hope exactly, just a whisper of possibility. Claire hadn't meant to pass the school. At least that's what she told herself as her footsteps slowed on the cracked sidewalk just across from the rusted chain-link fence. It was late afternoon, the kind of soft gold hour that made even the pavement shimmer with warmth. The school bell had rung minutes ago, and children spilled onto the street like water escaping a glass too full. She stopped beneath the sycamore tree, one hand resting lightly on her bag strap. From behind her sunglasses, she scanned the crowd, pretending to check her phone. And there she was, Lila. Her dark braid bounced as she ran toward the crossing guard backpack nearly twice her size. Claire didn't need to hear her voice to know she was laughing. It was in the skip of her step, the looseness of her shoulders. A man her father presumably waved from the other side. Claire saw him smile, tired but genuine. Claire's breath hitched. She hadn't seen a child smile like that in a long time. Before she could stop herself, Claire crossed to the park down the block and found a bench near the swings. It was quieter here, just the occasional creak of the chain, the rustle of leaves. A young mother helped her toddler down the slide. When he landed with a thud and laugh, the mother scooped him up in an embrace so instinctive, so familiar, Claire had to look away. It came back like a tide, the weight of small arms around her neck, laughter under a blanket fort, the feel of a forehead pressed against hers, sticky with fever, but clinging to comfort. Claire shut her eyes. A breeze caught the corner of a napkin beside her. She turned her face up toward the sun, blinking back heat that had nothing to do with the weather. She hadn't spoken to anyone about her daughter in years. Not really, not outside therapy or court-mandated meetings. The world expected her to move on, but she hadn't moved. Not really. She had simply existed in another orbit far enough away from children's birthday parties and playgrounds that the pain became dull background noise. Until Lila. Claire opened her eyes and looked across the park. She hadn't noticed before, but Lila and her father had walked this way. They sat at a bench not far from her own Eli, sipping from a paper coffee cup, Lila swinging her legs and chatting endlessly. Claire leaned slightly to the side enough to see the girl's face. The image twisted something in her. She stood quickly, too quickly, and adjusted her coat. One last glance and she turned away. But even as she walked, her hands trembling, her thoughts remained fixed not on the memory of her own daughter, but on this living, laughing child who had called her the pretty lady and offered her a moment of innocence she hadn't known she was missing. Claire didn't know what to do yet, but something was shifting, and she felt it in the space behind her ribs, where grief had long made its home. Claire turned the key slowly in the door, the faint click echoing louder than expected in the stillness of her apartment. She stepped inside, slipped off her shoes, and dropped her keys gently into the ceramic dish by the entrance. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. She didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she walked through the narrow hallway past the kitchen with untouched dishes, the living room where no one sat anymore, and paused at the closed door at the very end. The doorknob gave easily under her hand, but the air inside was different, heavier, untouched. Sacred. She hadn't been in here in months, maybe longer. The afternoon sun filtered through white curtains that hadn't been opened in years. Dust danced in the light like tiny spirits. Claire stepped in slowly as though her presence alone might disturb something holy. The room was small, just 10 by 12, but every inch of it had once throbbed with life. The walls were still painted a soft seafoam green. On the far wall, dozens of crayon drawings curled slightly at the corners. Stick figure families, rainbows with too many colors. Lopsided houses labeled with names in crooked handwriting. Claire crouched slowly, her knees cracking faintly, and sat cross-legged on the carpet exactly where the bed used to be. She ran a hand over the spot, then looked around until her gaze landed on a small, worn elephant. It sat alone in the corner. She picked it up gently, its fabric faded from countless hugs and midnight tears. One of the ears had been sewn back on badly by Claire herself, with hands that had been shaking and eyes filled with tears. She pressed the toy to her chest and closed her eyes, and the silence filled the room. Not cold, not cruel, just still. A single tear slid down her cheek unnoticed. She didn't sob. She didn't scream. She just sat there breathing in the dust of memories, surrounded by drawings that hadn't aged and laughter that no longer echoed. After a while, her breath began to tremble. She opened her mouth but said nothing, just the faint sound of her breath catching in her throat like a held-back song or a prayer that came too late. The kitchen was small, but warm, its chipped tile floor softened by the scent of cinnamon oatmeal and the gentle hum of Saturday morning cartoons playing in the next room. Eli stirred the pot slowly, his eyes heavy-lidded from the night shift. Lila sat at the table legs, swinging her coloring book open but untouched. She was staring at the phone on the counter. Eli noticed. "You expecting a call bug?" he asked gently, setting 2 chipped bowls on the table. Lila shrugged. "Maybe." He raised an eyebrow and handed her a spoon. "From who?" She poked at the oatmeal with the edge of her spoon. "The lady, the one with the pretty coat." Eli blinked, surprised. "You mean Claire Lilas?" Eyes lit up. "You remembered her name?" He chuckled softly, then sat across from her, rubbing the back of his neck. I remember, you've talked about her all week. She said my name like she meant it. Lila said seriously, a voice barely above a whisper. Eli paused, heart aching at the rawness in her words. He leaned forward. Sweetie, I don't want you to get your hopes too high. Sometimes people, they just pass through. Lila didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. Instead, she whispered, I think she might call. And Eli, trying to be gentle but realistic, only reached across the table and squeezed her little hand. Well, he said if she does well, be happy. And if she doesn't well, still be okay, right? Lila nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed on the phone. Across town, Claire sat in her apartment, legs curled under her, the phone in her lap, glowing softly. The message was typed. Again. Hi, Eli. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I would love to see Lila again. Maybe for a short visit, just a day. She hovered over the send button. Her thumb trembled. Then backspace. Deleted. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window, hair loose, eyes tired. But there was something else there now. Certainty, yes, but also longing. A flicker of courage. She sighed, then typed the message again. Stared. Deleted. 3 times. Still, she didn't shut off the phone. She held it. Because deep down, she didn't need to reread Lila's note to remember what it said. Even just for a day. Claire stared at the contact on her screen, Eli, Lila's dad. Her finger hovered above the call button, as if pressing it would crack something deeper than glass, something inside her. The apartment was silent. The only movement was the slow rise and fall of her chest, shallow with nerves. Her thumb trembled. She took one deep breath, then another, impressed. It rang once, twice. Then hello, Eli's voice, rough but gentle. Claire swallowed hard. Hi, it's Claire. We met outside the school. A pause, then warmth. Of course, I remember. She closed her eyes for a second. I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to thank you again. For being kind, and to say I've been thinking about Lila. Eli didn't speak right away. She imagined him weighing every word the way cautious people do when they've lived through disappointment. She's been thinking about you too, he finally said. A lot. Claire's throat tightened. I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but would it be all right if I visited just for a short while? Maybe just one day. There was a pause, then, can I ask why Claire's heart beat faster? Because I miss her, she said, voice cracking. And because I lost someone once, and maybe she's not the only one who needs this. A longer pause this time. Then a soft breath from Eli. One day he said gently, we'll take it one step at a time. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, relief washing over her in waves. Thank you, she whispered. Truly. Across town, Eli ended the call and turned to where Lila had been pretending not to listen. But she was already bouncing, both hands clapped to her cheeks. She's really coming, she squealed. Eli chuckled, heart tugged in all directions. Yeah, kiddo. She's really coming. Claire stood at the gate holding a small paper bag and a heart pounding like it hadn't in years. She had dressed simply, soft blue sweater jeans, hair tucked behind her ears. No makeup, no mask, just her. The door swung open before she could knock. Lila stood there in a pink dress with daisies on it, the one she'd circled in the secondhand catalog last spring. Her hair was pulled into bouncy pigtails, and in her hand was a crayon drawing that read, Welcome, Miss Claire. Claire nearly cried. Instead, she knelt. Hi, sweetheart. Lila ran into her arms without a moment's hesitation. You came, Claire held her tighter than she expected, then leaned back to look at her face. You look beautiful. Lila beamed. I dressed up for the museum. Behind them, Eli stepped out, one hand in his worn pocket, the other rubbing the back of his neck. Thanks for coming, he said. She's been counting the days. Claire stood. So have I. They exchanged a look, careful, unsure, but not cold. The museum was quiet that morning, a Tuesday lull between school field trips and weekend crowds. Claire led Lila through the hall of fossils, narrating stories as if she were discovering the world all over again. This one, she said, pointing to a massive dinosaur skeleton, was called an apatosaurus. Some thought it was slow, but did you know it could whip its tail so fast it sounded like thunder? Lila gasped, wide-eyed. Like a sky dragon, Eli trailed a few feet behind and hands in his coat pockets watching. He wasn't sure what to expect. But seeing Lila so animated, so open, it touched something buried beneath months of exhaustion. And Claire didn't speak like someone playing a part. She spoke like someone remembering who she used to be. They wandered through ancient artifacts, space exhibits, and interactive displays. Lila reached for Claire's hand again and again, and each time Claire gripped it in as if anchoring herself in the moment. By the time they reached the art corner, Lila was laughing. Claire knelt beside her at the coloring table, both of them sketching trees and suns, and finally a stick figure drawing of Lila, Miss Claire, and Daddy. Eli looked away. Not because he didn't want to see, but because he did, and it scared him. The scent of sugar and cinnamon drifted through the small kitchen, clinging to the curtains and warming the air like a memory. Claire leaned over the baking tray, watching Lila sprinkle a final pinch of cinnamon on the lumpy cookie dough pieces. "I told you," Lila said with exaggerated seriousness, "it's my secret recipe." Claire laughed. "Store-bought dough and cinnamon," Lila nodded proudly. "It makes them taste like magic." Eli leaned against the door frame, which was crossed, watching them from a distance. There was something surreal in the softness of the moment. Claire in his kitchen, Lila in full giggle mode, and the oven timer ticking down like it had always belonged to a happier home. After the cookies were in, Lila dragged Claire into the living room to draw. The coffee table became an art studio. Crayons rolled across the carpet. Claire drew a lopsided flower. Lila drew 3 stick figures again, this time under a rainbow. Claire noticed the small heart above their heads. "Is that us?" she asked gently. Lila grinned. "Yep. And the rainbow means we're safe. That's what Daddy says." Claire's smile faltered just a little, but she nodded. "He's right." Later, as Claire slipped on her coat and reached for her purse, she felt something crinkled inside. She pulled it out, another drawing. This one was just a note in Lila's uneven writing. "Come back again. I like when you smile." Claire held it for a long moment, her throat tightening. When she looked up, Eli was watching her, not with suspicion this time, but something quieter, something closer to hope. "I'll see you soon," she whispered to Lila. "Promise," Claire knelt. "Pinky promise." And in the hush of that goodbye, a day meant to be borrowed left behind something permanent. The house had settled into stillness, save for the faint ticking of the old wall clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Lila was finally asleep, curled up in bed, with her stuffed rabbit nestled under her chin. Eli stepped into the dimly lit living room, where Claire sat quietly on the couch, nursing a cup of chamomile tea she had insisted wasn't necessary. She looked different now, less poised, more present. Her hands cupped the mug like it anchored her. "Thanks again," Eli said as he sat across from her. "For today." Claire looked up. "It meant more to me than you know." Eli nodded but didn't smile. His posture was relaxed, but his jaw was tight-guarded, deliberate. "She's a good kid," Claire offered gently. "She is," he said, then paused. "But she's been through a lot." There it was, not an accusation, a boundary. Claire nodded slowly. "I know, I didn't come here to confuse her." He leaned forward at elbows on his knees, voice low. "You seem kind, Claire. But whatever you're going through, whatever this was today, I need to know you're not just passing through." Claire met his gaze, eyes clear but tired. "I lost a daughter," she said. 3 years ago." Silence. Eli exhaled through his nose. "I'm sorry, thank you," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to fill a void. I just saw something in Lila, something I missed in myself." Eli looked down, thumb rubbing a worn spot on his jeans. "She drew a picture of you under a rainbow," Claire added. "Said it meant you made her feel safe." That softened something in him. "She's all I've got," he said quietly. "I'm doing my best to keep her from hoping too much." "I understand," Claire said. "You don't need to trust me yet, but I won't hurt her." They sat in the hush for a moment longer, 2 broken hearts negotiating the fragile middle between protection and possibility. As Claire stood to leave, Eli followed her to the door. "Take care," he said, but his voice was less wary now, more wondering. She smiled gently. "You too." Outside, the night was cold, but her chest felt warm. It was a Saturday morning draped in sunlight, and Lila had been sitting by the window since 9 a.m. Elbows on the sill, waiting. Every car that passed made her sit a little straighter, until finally a small gray sedan pulled up in front of their apartment. She shot up from the couch like a spring. "She's here, Daddy. She's really here." Eli looked up from the sink where he was rinsing dishes, hiding the smile tugging at his mouth. You remembered to say thank you last time, right? Twice, Lila chirped, slipping on her sandals. The knock was soft, but Lila opened the door before Claire could try a second time. Hi, Miss Claire, she beamed. Claire knelt down laughing as she handed Lila a tote bag filled with coloring books and markers. I thought we could make masterpieces today. You remembered? Lila squealed, tugging her in. Eli wiped his hands on a towel as they entered. Morning, he said. Hi, Eli, Claire said, her tone easy, warm. Hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, he replied. She's been vibrating since breakfast. By noon, the coffee table was covered in rainbow dragons, castles, and stick-figure superheroes. Claire and Lila were both cross-legged on the floor, elbows smudged with marker ink. From the hallway, Mrs. Perez, their neighbor, peeked in. Well, well, she said to Eli, who stood in the doorway. Your little one's smiling more these days, she whispered with a wink. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Eli looked toward Claire and Lila, heads bent over a castle tower, both laughing over who'd drawn the bigger son. Ill try, he murmured. It was an ordinary Wednesday evening, nothing spectacular about the hour, the weather, or the dinner simmering on the stovetop. Yet something about the air in the small kitchen felt different. Claire stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, peering into the kitchen drawer that had been sticking in all week. She jiggled it once, then crouched down, pulling out a small screwdriver from her purse. Eli leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her work. Didn't take you for the handy type, he teased, a lightness in his voice that hadn't been there before. Claire smirked without looking up. I've had time to learn. Grief doesn't care what gender you are, it just teaches you to fix what's broken. The drawer came loose with a small click, and she gently realigned it, sliding it in and out with ease. There, she said, brushing off her hands. Better, much, Eli said. But he wasn't looking at the drawer. Later, after Lila had gone to bed, Eli handed Claire a cup of tea the same way he had before. But this time he sat beside her on the couch instead of across the room. They didn't speak at first. The silence wasn't heavy, though it was warm, expectant. You don't have to keep doing this, Eli said eventually. Helping, showing up. I know, Claire replied, looking at the tea in her hands. But I want to. Eli turned toward her, studying her face, not for answers, but maybe for reassurance. You're good with her, he said, and with drawers, apparently. Claire chuckled softly, then added, maybe I'm just trying to build something again. He nodded. We could use the help. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside that modest living room, a quiet shift had begun, so small, it could have gone unnoticed, but not by hearts that had been waiting for something real. Not this time. The apartment was quiet. Lila had fallen asleep early after a long day at the park, curled beneath her favorite blanket, her sketchbook still open beside her. Claire stood on the small balcony, leaning against the rail. The night air was cool but kind, brushing past her shoulders like a whisper. Eli joined her, handing over a steaming mug of chamomile tea. Thanks, she said softly. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've shared more than words over time. Below, streetlights glowed amber, and distant sirens faded into the hum of the city. She's changed, Claire said, nodding toward Lila's window. Not just more talkative, braver, happier. She misses her mom, Eli replied after a pause. But she doesn't talk about it much. I think she doesn't want to make me sad. Claire glanced at him. Have you ever told her how you feel? I try, he said. Some nights I think about it. Then I look at her little face and the words just sink. She nodded as if understanding something unspoken. Then after a moment, my son would have been 9 this year. Eli didn't move. He didn't ask questions. He just stood beside her quietly like a tree giving shade. Claire continued, her voice steady but low. I don't talk about him, not with anyone. Not because I don't want to, but because once I start, I don't know if I can stop. I'm here, Eli said. Claire smiled faintly, eyes glossy but dry. That's why I'm still standing here. The stars were faint above the city glow, but they were there just like her grief. Quiet, constant, but no longer alone. Claire had been preparing herself to leave. Not in a dramatic way, not with bags packed or final goodbyes, but in the subtle pulling away she'd mastered over the years. Fewer visits, shorter stays, less laughter in her eyes. She'd begun to fear the feeling creeping back into her heart. Warmth, hope, attachment. Things she didn't think she deserved. That evening, she arrived with the intention of staying for just 20 minutes. Just enough time to drop off the picture book as she promised Lila. Just enough time to make a clean exit, but Lila had other plans. Claire stepped into the apartment and was immediately greeted with the smell of macaroni and the echo of a child's humming from the living room. Miss Claire, Lila shouted, darting toward her, hands behind her back. Close your eyes. Claire blinked. We're playing a game, no a gift. With a wary smile, Claire closed her eyes and knelt. She felt Lila's small fingers fumbling around her wrist. There was a gentle tug, the feeling of something soft knotted. Okay, Lila whispered. Open. Claire looked down. A simple bracelet braided from 3 colors of string, blue, green, and yellow. Wobbly, imperfect, and beautiful. For you, Lila said shyly, so you don't forget today. Claire's hands trembled as she touched the bracelet. She couldn't speak right away. Something was lodged in her throat. Elila, this is beautiful. It's friendship colors the girl bears, the girl explained proudly. Green is for growing. Blue is for being brave. Yellow is for sunshine. You're all of them. Claire smiled through glassy eyes. So are you. She didn't leave after 20 minutes. She stayed until bedtime stories were finished, until Lila had drifted to sleep, and until Eli offered her tea with that quiet kindness she was beginning to rely on. That night, back in her own home, Claire didn't take the bracelet off. Not when she made tea, not when she sat in silence, and not when she cried for what was lost, for what was being found. The line she had drawn between her life and theirs had faded, and for the first time in years, she let it. The afternoon sun filtered gently through the trees as children poured out of the school doors in a rush of backpacks, sneakers, and laughter. Eli stood just outside the gate, slightly out of breath from finishing a last-minute delivery job, while Claire leaned against the fence, arms crossed, trying not to look out of place. It was the first time she'd come with him. Eli had asked gently that morning, "Want to pick her up with me today?" She hesitated, but only for a second. Now, as they stood side by side, something about the moment felt foreign yet natural. Lila spotted them and broke into a run, her braid bouncing behind her. Yet Miss Claire knelt just in time for Lila to wrap her arms around her. I told Mrs. Jenkins you were coming today. Lila beamed. She said she wanted to meet you. Claire looked up startled, just as a woman with kind eyes and coffee-stained papers walked over. You must be Miss Claire, the teacher said warmly. Lila talks about you constantly. Claire stood slightly flustered. Oh, I'm not. I'm just, the teacher waved her off. You 3 make a great team. Claire blinked, then looked to Eli, who simply smiled, unbothered and proud. She looked down at Lila, who was tugging her hand, then back at the teacher. A team. The word lingered in Claire's mind the entire walk home. She never imagined herself on any kind of team again. But here she was, feet walking in step with 2 others, laughter bubbling ahead of her, and a warmth growing behind the walls shed once built so carefully. Claire didn't set out to volunteer. Not really. It started with dropping off a few unused blankets at the neighborhood shelter she'd kept folded in a closet for years untouched, since her daughter's nursery had been cleared. Then it was gently used storybooks, then helping with snacks, then reading aloud when the usual volunteer couldn't make it. Before long, she was a fixture there. A new rhythm took hold. Tuesday mornings meant sorting donations. Thursday afternoons meant group art time with kids whose eyes lit up just like Lila's. And laughter, real laughter, began coming easier. One afternoon, Eli stopped by. He hadn't expected to find her there. He was delivering donated food from a local business and paused when he saw her cross-legged on the floor surrounded by children. She had a paper crown on her head, a marker smudge on her cheek, and she was roaring like a dragon as the kids squealed with delight. He stood there in the doorway for a long moment, watching, feeling something stir in him. It wasn't just admiration. It was recognition. This wasn't the woman who once hesitated to speak. This wasn't the one whose eyes carried a storm. This Claire was open, bright, becoming. And somehow seeing her there, alive, joyful, giving, made something click inside him too. Not just for her, but for all of them. They weren't just patching broken pieces anymore. They were building something whole, together. The smell of motor oil and fresh-cut pine filled the garage as Eli leaned against the hood of a beat-up sedan. His hands were greasy, but his thoughts weren't on the car. Across from him, Marcus's oldest friends ordered sockets into a rusty toolbox. "You've been quiet," Marcus finally said. Eli sighed. "Yeah, Marcus didn't push. Not yet." After a few beats of silence, Eli spoke again, low, almost like a confession. "I was scared she'd disappear, but she keeps showing up." Marcus looked up, brow raised. "I mean, I thought it was a one-time thing." Eli continued wiping his hands. The museum, the cookies, that look in her eyes when Lila said stay. "I thought she'd realize it was too much too soon. That would be too much." And Marcus asked. "She didn't run," Eli said simply. "She kept showing up, school pickups, story time. She even knows Lila's favorite ice cream, now down to the swirl." There was a pause before Marcus smiled. "Sounds like she's not going anywhere." Eli chuckled, but there was a deeper weight in his voice. "It's not just Lila, she's healing." The words hung in the air between them. For the first time in years, Eli felt it's something steady, something real, not just love, but the courage to trust it again. He wasn't used to that, but maybe it was time. The bedtime ritual was simple now: 3 hugs, 1 story, and 2 kisses. Claire had learned that Lila liked her blankets tucked just so, with her stuffed giraffe nestled under her chin. It was all ordinary, quiet, even mundane. Until that night. Claire smoothed the sheets, brushed a loose curl from Lila's forehead, and whispered, "Sleep tight." Lila yawned heavy-eyed and whispered back, "Night, Mommy Claire." Claire stilled. Her hand froze midair, her breath caught in her chest. Lila didn't seem to notice. Her lids fluttered, and within seconds she was asleep, completely unaware of what she had said. But Claire heard it, every syllable, every beat of the unspoken invitation it carried. "Mommy Claire." From the hallway, Eli had heard it too. He had paused with the laundry basket in his arms, unsure if he'd imagined it. But when he glanced back through the cracked door and saw Claire standing there, completely still, one hand at her heart, they knew she had heard it too. Neither of them spoke about it that night. They didn't need to, because something had shifted. Quietly, permanently, and none of them would ever quite be the same again. Claire hadn't meant to pull away. Not really. But over the past few days, her text to Eli had slowed her visits, shortened, her excuses multiplied. She told herself it was just getting busy, but she knew better. One night she came home after a long walk and stood by the mantel. Her fingers found the old photo frame automatically. It was cracked in the corner. She hadn't bothered to replace the glass. The picture inside was soft at the edges, the colors faded, but the girl's smile was still there. Amelia, her daughter. Claire sat on the floor and held the frame to her chest like it might still be warm. Guilt rolled over her, not sharp but low and constant, like an old storm returning. Was she betraying Amelia by feeling this happy? No, not happy. Not quite. Hopeful. That was worse. Meanwhile, Lila noticed the silence first. She didn't say it at school. She didn't mention it over breakfast. But when her dad picked her up from the library, and she didn't spot Claire waiting outside like she usually did, no smile, no wave, no "How was your book?" Something dropped in her chest. That night, as Eli tucked her into bed, she spoke into her pillow. "Dad." "Yes, sweetheart." Lila hesitated. "Did I do something wrong?" "Elise." Heart paused mid-beat. He sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a curl from her forehead. "What makes you think that? She hasn't come by. Or called. Miss Claire always says goodnight." He looked into her eyes and saw something fragile trembling beneath them. "Hey," he said gently, "you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups just need space." Lila was quiet for a long moment. Then softly she said, "But I miss her." Eli nodded, hugging her close. "Yeah, I think I do too." The next evening, Eli noticed something strange. The porch light had been flicked, off like always, but just beyond its shadow, a small container sat on the step. Steam clung to the inside of its lid. A note in Claire's delicate script was tucked beneath it. "For your mom. And maybe you too." No signature, no explanation. He picked up the soup, the warmth of it seeping through the container and into his hands. The smell, carrot, ginger, something gently nostalgia hit him harder than expected. Like a memory you didn't know you missed. He looked out across the street, half expecting to see her car lingering by the curb. Nothing. She wasn't ready to talk. But she hadn't disappeared. And somehow, that meant everything. The next morning, Eli sat in the cramped back corner of the auto shop on his break half-eaten sandwich, in one hand the thermos Claire had left beside him. His friend Derek slid into the chair across from him. "You've been staring into space like the coffee machine insulted your family?" Eli smirked. "Maybe it did." Derek leaned forward. "It's her, isn't it? The woman." Claire. Eli hesitated. Then, "Yeah, what's the story?" "She's been coming around, mostly for Lila. But we talk. It's been good." He paused. "Really good." Derek waited. "But now she's pulling away a bit. I don't know if I should give her space or—" He trailed off. "Or," Derek prompted. Eli looked down at the table. "Or if I'm just clinging to what's good. Because it's good. Because it feels like hope." Derek sat back. "You ever think maybe that is what real is? Not perfect, not easy, just good." Eli looked out the shop window. The sky was turning gold at the edges. For the first time in a while, he let the question settle without needing an answer. Claire stands before the mirror in her apartment, dressed in a crisp blazer and pencil skirt, rehearsing the speech she's supposed to deliver at the high-profile conference later that evening. The speech, full of polished corporate jargon and carefully crafted messages, feels hollow to her today. Her phone buzzes repeatedly with messages from colleagues reminding her how important this moment is. Her gaze drifts to a photo on the dresser, a candid snapshot of Lila smiling shyly after last year's school recital. The contrast between the sterile, pressured world of the conference and the warm, imperfect world of Lila's school pierces Claire's heart. Instead of grabbing her briefcase, she slips on a pair of worn boots, mud still clinging to the soles from the puddles outside their apartment building, and quietly steps out the door. The school auditorium buzzes with parents and children. Claire's presence is unexpected. The other parents wear neat shoes and smart coats, while Claire's boots look out of place, scuffed and streaked with dirt. Her heart races as she finds an empty seat near the back, a stark contrast to the front row seat she's always imagined at the conference. The recital begins. Lila's small, confident voice fills the room as she performs, and Claire feels tears prick at her eyes. Every note and every word is a balm to her weary soul. After the applause dies down, Lila runs towards her, cheeks flushed with excitement. She wraps her arms tightly around Claire and whispers with a proud smile, "I saved you a seat in the middle." Claire clutches Lila close, feeling the weight of missed opportunities and the quiet victory of choosing what matters most. Early morning sunlight filters through the kitchen window as Eli's mom pours a cup of tea. Suddenly, her hand trembles. She staggers and collapses onto the floor. Eli bursts into action, calling emergency services, while Claire, who's visiting, immediately kneels beside them. Panic surges through Claire's veins. Memories of loss flash in her mind, sharp and raw. They rush to the hospital, the world narrowing to the hum of the ambulance and the quiet urgency in Eli's voice as he reassures his mom. In the sterile hospital waiting room, the cold walls press in. Claire sits beside Eli, their hands accidentally brushing. Breaking the silence, Claire's voice trembles as she confides, "I lost her because I thought I had more time." The words hang heavy between them, a raw admission of guilt and grief. Eli gently places his hand over hers, grounding her silently, saying, "You're not alone." The moment deepens their bond, a quiet promise of understanding and support as they face uncertainty together. Claire approaches the quiet grave, her steps slow and deliberate. The world feels heavy, but when she looks up, she sees Eli standing a respectful distance away, with Lila beside him. They don't crowd her space, they simply stand as silent witnesses, offering steady support. The wind whispers softly through the trees, carrying memories and unspoken words. Kneeling by the grave, Claire gently takes Lila's hand. With a soft voice, she tells Lila about her daughter, the light she brought, the love they shared, and the pain of loss that shaped her heart. Lila listens quietly, eyes wide with empathy and curiosity. Afterwards, Lila pulls out a sketchbook and draws a picture, Claire holding hands with two girls, one small and smiling, one grown and tender, connected by an unbreakable bond. Claire's heart swells with gratitude and hope, feeling the first true step toward healing. Lila sat cross-legged on the worn rug in the living room, her small hands trembling slightly as she held up the drawing she had just finished. The paper was a burst of color, bright yellows, soft blues, and gentle greens, forming a simple yet powerful scene. Three figures stood hand in hand beneath a shining sun that smiled down on them like a promise. One figure was small with curly hair and bright eyes, clearly Lila herself. Beside her, a taller woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, Claire. And next to Claire, a man whose posture was protective yet unsure, Eli. Lila's chest swelled with pride as she looked up at them, her gaze resting on Eli. He knelt down, studying the picture with a softness that seemed to catch him off guard. His usual guarded expression softened, and for a moment uncertainty flickered through his eyes, mingling with hope and something else he couldn't quite name yet. He glanced at Claire, then back at the drawing, the weight of the unspoken settling quietly in the room. Chapter 32. The question and answer, Lila. Wide eyes met Eli's as she tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Her voice was quiet, but each word carried the weight of her hope and vulnerability. I know she's not my real mommy, but can she be the one who stays? Eli's gaze faltered. The surprise of the question left him momentarily speechless. His throat tightened, and he looked away, struggling to gather his thoughts. The room seemed to hold his breath, the silence stretching between them like fragile glass. Claire rose from the couch and stepped closer to Lila, kneeling so their eyes met. Her hand found Lila's small one, squeezing it gently. If you'll have me, I'd like that. Eli's eyes flicked back to them, the soft smile breaking through the hesitance. Something tender and real sparked in his gaze, the quiet beginning of a family not born from biology, but from choice and love. Lila's face lit up, and Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief and hope she hadn't dared to feel until this moment. The morning sun filtered softly through the calf window, casting a warm glow over the small wooden table where Claire and Eli sat. Their mugs steamed gently between them, the rich aroma of coffee mingling with the quiet hum of early conversations around them. They talked about little things, the unpredictability of spring weather, Lila's latest drawing the best route to the school, but beneath the surface an unspoken current ran strong. Every pause, every glance held the weight of something more profound, something fragile yet hopeful. Eli's fingers traced the rim of his mug as he finally gathered the courage to speak. Clearing his throat, his voice came out hesitant, raw, with vulnerability. Would you want to do this, all of it? His eyes searched Claire's face, looking for a sign, a spark, something to anchor this uncertain new future. The question hung in the air, delicate and heavy all at once. Claire felt a sudden warmth flood her chest as Eli's eyes searched hers with hopeful uncertainty. Tears welled up, blurring her vision for a moment, but she blinked them away gently. Slowly, she reached across the table and covered Eli's hand with hers. Her touch was soft but steady, a silent reassurance. No promises to be perfect. She whispered, her voice trembling just slightly. Just present. The words hung between them, fragile but true. In that quiet calf corner, a gentle understanding settled, not a grand vow, but a commitment to show up, to try, and to build something real together. Eli's lips curled into a small, genuine smile, and Claire felt a flicker of hope ignite, the first spark of a family forged in love, acceptance, and presence. The room was softly lit by the glow of a single lamp, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Takeout containers were spread out across the living room floor. No fancy tablecloth, no fine china, just the familiar clutter of everyday life. Claire, Eli, and Lila sat close together, sharing laughter and stories between bites. The hum of the city outside faded into the background, leaving only the quiet comfort of being together. Lila looked up, her eyes shining bright with pure joy. This is my favorite day ever. Claire's heart swelled. She reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind Lila's ear, her smile soft and full of love. Mine too. No rings, no grand gestures, just something real, something honest, a family built not on perfection, but on presence. Life isn't always about perfect moments or grand promises. Sometimes the best thing is just being together, sharing simple yet heartfelt moments. Claire, Eli, and Lila have found a home in each other, not perfect, but filled with love and presence. And from those simple things, a real family is formed with heart, with patience, and with the hope that no matter what tomorrow brings, they will always have each other. The journey is still long, but today they have a new beginning, a beginning of truth, acceptance, and unconditional love.